everything now. So, hello. Thank you everyone for coming and joining me. My name is Chris Whittaker. I'm a choreographer and I have finally managed to figure out how technology works. So welcome to Instagram and Facebook. So I've got Instagram on the go here and Facebook here. So I apologise if I'm kind of looking all over the place. Let's get this back up. There we go, we're in. So I'm Chris Whittaker, choreographer, started as a performer, moved into choreography. So most recently I was supposed to be working on Test Match, which was a play for English touring theatre and Theatre Royal Bath. It was a joint mix. So when I got asked to do this by King's Head Theatre, I thought I didn't know how much people would know about the prep work involved between choreographing for theatre and plays and musicals and the difference between that and how you approach it and what a choreographer kind of information we get before we get into a rehearsal room. So I thought it'd kind of be good to talk about those kind of things. If you have any questions, please throw them up at any time. I've got a few kind of pictures to go through kind of different shows I've done and how you work and adapt the styles. So for me, whenever I'm presented with a new show, and normally that comes from either a director or a producer, the producer can approach you and say, we've got this show going on and we'd love to have you involved. Or the director can come and say, I'm directing this show, please, not they come and do this. And they'll have a meeting and they'll chat through their idea of the show and whether your kind of styles will work. So what example should we use first? So if we use this is Judy. So this was Judy that I did in the West End. So this started life as Through the Mill, and it opened at a small fringe venue in South London, and we opened there and it did a short run under a different name called Through the Mill. And so that was creating an autobiographical piece about Judy Garland. And so for me, that was taking work that already existed in that we used a lot of her songs. And so taking choreography that had already been created many, many years ago for all these various shows that she did and films and trying to create that. But obviously we had different actors, we had actor musos, we didn't have a massive set, we didn't have all the stuff that you kind of would envisage if you're creating a Judy Garland spectacle. So it was taking that and then making it my own, which is something that I've been lucky enough to do with a couple of shows that I've worked on. So for Judy, so you can kind of see here. So I'll bring it a bit closer so for those of you that can see. So this is the wonderful Belinda, who was one of our Judys. We had 3 Judys in the show. So in creating this is taking some of the iconic, so I'm trying to see that everyone can see it, taking some of the more iconic moments from sort of Judy Garland and her costuming that she had, which from our set and costume team was incredible. And then trying to marry that, but making it work in a way that works on our actresses. And so I think you can see here, we've got the 2 of them, and it's creating, again, taking iconic moments from Judy Garland's kind of repertoire and bringing that in. So that was my first kind of way into working on those kind of shows. So that was doing stuff that already existed, but making it different. Does that make sense? So kind of working on a show that has a foundation in something that's real. So you're not creating something from scratch. So say if you're working on The Wild Party, where you just create anything you want. Working on a show that has something true and that has something that everyone would know. So I've been very lucky as well as Judy to do Singing in the Rain and Top Hat, which are shows that are pretty iconic from a choreographic point of view. And so, question in. Do you find collaboration between choreographers on a show helpful, or do you prefer to keep your work separate? Working with a fight director, so the last show I did working on Sing Your Heart Out had Kate Waters, incredible fight director. And that was amazing because we came at it from 2 very different points, where she comes from keeping it, the fight real and looking aggressive, and I come from how do I then put a character reaction from everybody else into that. So I really enjoyed working with them. If there's more than one choreographer, in terms of not just fight choreographer, but there's 2 choreographers working on a piece, I don't mind it. It makes it interesting because you then have to work out who is responsible for which bits in terms of is someone the ideas behind it and someone then jumps on top of that, and it's just finding the way you work. But I love the collaboration. It's kind of the main point of our show is collaborating, because it's the director and the MD and the choreographer and the set designer all trying to come, the lighting designer, and everyone trying to come together to create that vision to make it look as though it's one person. So whilst working separately is good because you get to kind of have your own tunnel vision, that can sometimes be bad because there's no one there to say that doesn't quite work, or there's no one there to go, that's brilliant, but have you thought about doing it like this? So yeah, I love working with other people. So thanks for the question, Christian. That was a really good question. If anyone's got any others, please just keep throwing them out and I'll answer them as soon as I can. But yeah, so going back to kind of working on shows that are iconic and have an existing back catalogue. So taking, Fred Astaire, Gene Kelly from their Singing in the Rain and Top Hat and those kind of things. It's iconic and you can't mess with that, but you can't just recreate it because copyright, and also that's not what people want to see. If they want to see them doing it, they'll watch the film. So for me, it was great fun to go in on Top Hat and take the rhythms of the tap that Fred Astaire created, and the iconic moments of when he's doing the windmill with the cane in Top Hat, White Tie and Tails, and being able to just play with that and make my own little spin on it. So I take the rhythm, but I do something different with the feet. So that was great fun. So that's my working on stuff that has a basis already, if that makes sense. And in terms of coming to stuff that's completely fresh and new, so shows like The Wild Party that I was lucky enough to do last year with Hannah Chiswick, or Susical that I did at the Southwark Playhouse with James Tobias. They're great fun in that you can just let your imagination go and have a great old time. So I've got some photos and some maps from things like that I can show you how I work with. So normally what will happen is the director will come to you and you'll normally sit with the set designer as well, and you'll go through everybody's kind of ideas for the show, how it's going to go, how it's going to look, if there's any themes that they want to really push, and also the limitations in that, okay, so we're working to this budget, so you suddenly can't have a kabuki drop, and you can't have this or this, but also limitations of space, that it's working in the thrust or the traverse, or you're working behind a proscenium arch but it's got to have something else sitting on top of it. So that's your first port of call, that you'll start having those conversations, and then you normally that's normally a couple of months before you even start getting into pre-production prep of auditions and rehearsals. So then you'll sit and you'll go through and you'll play with ideas, and that's when, for me, the backbone of any idea comes from where I can find the style and the character. So I hate doing shows that just have the same style over and over again. So if I can find a way of making a show different, or finding a style that really sits with it, or finding a few different styles that I can play with within that show, that's when I really sort of get excited by it, and I'll sit and I'll go through notepad after notepad. So each show normally has its own notepad full of stuff that when you go back over it is no relation to what you actually started with. So for Susical, we sat and we went through it, and I started looking at all these different styles that I could put together for the show and what each character's style is, because on a show like Susical, you're very lucky that each character has a very different thematic style in the music, so I can change that with the choreography. So for the Who's, it was all kind of this perfect Stepford Wives-esque, and that was my key into that. And then for the Monkeys, I was able to find this West Side Story cool kind of motif that I threw into it, and it's just finding those little things that you go, oh, that could work like that, then lets me go into my prep. So I hope that kind of helps with that initial, how you get the first concept for a show. So it's kind of a meeting of everyone's heads, and then you're allowed to go away and start playing with things before it gets into the rehearsal process. To kind of jump into the rehearsal process now, and kind of the weeks leading up to that for me, I'd normally still be in contact with the director, normally every day, every week, depending on kind of how busy everyone is, and the designer, just checking, have I got levels for this, have I got steps, costumes, is there anything restrictive? But I personally, and it changes for every choreographer, I don't like to have too many steps set before I get into a room, because I just find that as soon as I get in there, I might find that the dancers can't do that version because doesn't flow right for them, or it might be that the dancers are better than that, and the stuff that I came up with on my own doesn't like work for them because they're better than it or they can do more than I was expecting. So I like to have patterns done, and I can show you kind of like how that works for me. So like this is what I would normally go into rehearsal room with. So this is from West End Bears. This was just a number I did for last year's West End Bears. So I just like to go in. I'll have really detailed kind of patternings and when I need them to hit those patterns. But as for steps, I won't have too many. I'll know motifs and I'll know certain steps that I really want to have in there or that really fit with that piece of music. But as for kind of the complete choreography, that won't happen until I'm in the room. And it's amazing to create it in the room because then the dancers can throw something at you and the actors can chip in and you set it to everybody's ability rather than my ability, which is nowhere near as good as anyone who I've been able to work with. So yeah, so that's how I kind of build in, is that I'll sit down and I'll listen to the music and I'll just kind of really get engrossed in the music and listen to that to find out any beats that I want to hit out or any bits where I go, oh, that sounds like this needs to happen. And story wise, I know that this has to happen from the story. So the director will say, well, by this point, I need everyone to be on stage or I need everyone but this person to be off stage. So getting the logistics sorted is much more important for me to do up front than to do the actual choreography, because the choreography can happen a lot more naturally in the room. So yeah, so that's my kind of lead up to rehearsals. Obviously you've got auditions as well when you can find the dancers, and that will help you knowing where you can aim things, but again, it won't tell you exactly what their ability is because everything changes in a rehearsal room. I hope that's made sense, and if anyone's got any questions based on that, please feel free to shout them over. So what I thought I'd do now is talk you through kind of the different styles that I like to create and that I've been able to create so far. So I showed you Judy and kind of how that worked and the different styles that we managed to create with that. And then you go on to, so this was Blondel that I worked on there. Sorry, can you see that? So Blondel, this was Tim Rice musical that I was able to do at the Union with Sasha was directing herself, and that was amazing. So again, this is finding stuff where it's not just dancing for the sake of dancing. So this was the 4 washerwomen who were amazing, and working and finding a routine that we needed to do for them. So it had this kind of, at times the number felt like it could be this huge big dance number, but there was never any need for that to happen. So again, it was scaling it back and just finding a bit of fun that we could have with these 4 women and some buckets and some water, and it was amazing what we came up creating. And it's finding little moments like that that you think are going to be nothing, but actually turn out to be the sort of best moments of movement in the show for me especially. And then this was Cry Baby that I did at Arts Ed, so working, and again finding each different character. So these guys at the front are all kind of the rougher, more edgier side of things, and then this next row are the squeaky clean guys. And so it's finding the different movement languages for each couple of and each character, and that's for me the exciting bit, because if you just throw dance moves at people and say, right, do it all the same, it doesn't really make a movement language. And that's recently, kind of in the recent years since I've started doing movement direction, is what I've realized good choreography can do, is find a language for a show. And then so working on things like that where you have the chance to have so many different variations on stage at one time is great fun, because you've got the rougher side of things and how those interact with each other, and letting the actors act their way through the choreography makes it so much more interesting to watch from an audience point of view than just everyone doing beautiful step kicks from a corner, which, you know, is lovely to watch on one hand but is not on the other. Has anyone got any questions at the moment? Am I making any form of sense, or am I just rabbiting? Please let me know. And if there's anything specifically you want to know about kind of the creation of shows and stuff, throw it at me. Let me know. So yeah, that's kind of how I get into a show and how I find working on a show. In terms of when you're in rehearsals, I'm sure most of you who've been in rehearsals will know it's kind of, you just keep creating and keep trying out new things. And I've got so many books of ideas that I had at the beginning of a rehearsal process that are never got seen on stage. Christian, thank you for another question. When you say movement language, do you mean a linear path that melds with the story, or a beautiful dance? I mean a movement language that is a language that marries the whole show together. So there's no point for me, if I'm doing Sing Your Heart Out for the Lads, the show I did in Chichester, it's about a load of people in a pub. There's racism kind of being kicked off left, right, and centre. They're watching football. There's aggressive language. If they all suddenly start doing like a beautiful dance routine, it's not right. It doesn't make any sense. And whilst that would make me happy because I'd get to create a beautiful dance routine, that was never going to be happening. So it's about finding the right type of movement for that show. So again, Top Hat, if I suddenly made it all commercial, and I'm sure some people would love to see that, but it doesn't sit right for me as the choreographer of that show at that time. So it's about finding what I mean by movement language is the right type of movement and the style for that specific show or that particular moment in the show. Does that answer your question, Christian? I hope so. I hope that kind of helps a little bit. Just seeing if there's any chat in Facebook that I've missed out. Please let me know if there is. Hello, sorry. Monty, hello. As a director just starting out, how would you recommend I find out about different styles of movement and use of movement in theatre? I've no background in dance, but would love to know how to articulate myself properly when... So for me, Monty, when I work with a director, my biggest thing is I find reference points in terms of if a director comes to me and says, okay, I want this to happen, and gives me a frame of reference, like a film or a picture or any form of imagery that you can throw at me will really help. So say like we're doing a show and you so we're doing a big show and you want something. So this was from Wildbot. If you find out that you show me this picture and you say, okay, I want to create something with this theme or this style, I'll know exactly what you mean, rather than you saying, oh, I want it to be as if they're doing this, 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 because then it can get lost in translation. Whereas if you can say to me, I want this image, I want something like this, or I want something to go along these lines, that will really help us. So imagery and movie references, any other theatrical references. So you say, okay, I want it to be big chorus line type feel, or I want it to be like Frantic Assembly, that kind of style, where it's that kind of movement. So that's how I find contact between directors and choreographers really works. And I know a lot of directors who have found it easier to talk in reference points rather than in just saying, oh, can they do a little kick turn here or something. In terms of how to kind of broaden your knowledge of it, just watching things, watch as much as you can. If you just watch different types of dance, so watch ballets, watch watch a ballet, watch a Matthew Bourne, so you can see the difference between those. And Matthew Bourne is a great one to watch to learn how to tell a real story through dance, and then that leads you on to brilliant reference points. Watch musicals, just clips of musicals from kind of all the different reference points of dance. So in terms of like, you've got your chorus lines, you've got your Cats, you've got your Top Hats, you've got your Starlight Express, and all those kind of iconic dance musicals, Grease, anything like that. Watch them, or just watch snippets, and then you can say, okay, so I want it to be a little bit like this, or I want the feel of this. Talk about feel, and we understand that. We tend to understand that as a choreographer a lot more than anything else, because it's such a kind of emotive form. I hope that makes sense, Monty. I hope that answers your question. Sorry, I didn't see that. That was only 2 minutes ago. That's right, we're on top of this. Good. Has anyone got any other questions? I know I waffled at the beginning about kind of what my process is, but that's just my own personal take on how I create stuff and how I got into it. In terms of kind of the change of the choreography throughout the show, from what I start with to what I end, the biggest change for me always happens in tech, because that's when you can see exactly what you're going to end up with. Because up until then, you might never have seen a costume sometimes, or you might never have seen a set and realize that actually the steps that you thought were this are now this, and that's no one's fault. It's just because you haven't got the scale that you sometimes need. So for me, tech is when I go, I've never locked in a number until at least the end of tech. I mean, so by lock in, I mean up until press night, you're allowed to change kind of things and play around with things. And then what they do on the night before press night is you'll lock in a show, so it can't make any changes from that point, because that's what you're going to present to the press. So I will never, ever be happy with a number, really, until at least the end of tech, and then it's done 2 previews so that you can get a feel for it. Because sometimes as well, stories get lost because you've overcomplicated it, or you realise that there's not enough movement, and it's not until you see it on stage in a tech that you go, yeah, that needs a bit more, or that needs a bit less. Hello, Anna. Really interesting, thank you. Have you always choreographed the majority of the steps in the room? Yeah, so I've tried to choreograph an entire show or an entire number before I've got into a room, and it's great in that you can kind of feel confident in that you go in and go, there's a routine, you're done. But then it changes so much because people can't do it, or people can do more, or you realise that actually that doesn't work in that sense. And so I've always done it in a room, and it scares the hell out of me sometimes. And I know my wife is petrified because one day it won't happen, and I'm the one who comes home and's gone, oof, I did it. And she always used to say, excuse me, it's that I'm just pulling it out my bum, because I literally go into a room with ideas and with those maps that I showed, kind of how I know that by this point in the number I need everyone to be here in this formation. But how the steps happen and what happens, I tend to just do in the room. Recently, I've tried to start doing a little bit of prep and have a few numbers that I'll know a bit more about, just because of time, because I'm aware that sometimes I don't have as long in the room as I've done on previous projects. But more often than not, it will completely change to be something else. So I don't see the point in doing that in a room on my own and spending that time that could be spent working on other things, when it can just be done in the room and create the same feel, and everyone gets a bit of an input to it. Does that make sense? I hope that explains and answers that question for me anyway. Hello, Outside Edge. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, so if anyone's got any other questions about it, I'm just trying to think if there's anything I've not covered. I suppose the biggest thing, like I said at the beginning, that between working off West End, regional, and West End, how the work is created is exactly the same. It doesn't change. The only thing that changes is the scale, and that shouldn't affect the choreography, in my opinion. It's the same work that I created. So when we did Judy and took it all the way through, no, Christian, you're not annoying at all. Ask away. Ask all the questions. When I took Judy from, we took Judy, sorry, not me, off West End to the Southwark to West End, it didn't change the choreography in the slightest, other than for what the set allowed. What the story that I created with the choreography at the beginning was exactly the same as what was created at the end. It's just the scale of it and the finesse that I could spend longer on, because we had 3 versions of it. Christian, you sound like you've got another question. Throw it at me. And same. Where do I get my inspiration from? Am I led by imagery, music, or somewhere in between? That's from Shadi. Great question. I am inspired by anything and everything, and I know that sounds really uber creative and wonderful, but it literally depends. A lot of it comes from the music and sitting down with the MD and the score and trying to see what rhythms I can find to play with, because I really like pulling out rhythms that people necessarily don't always hear when you first listen to a song, because I think the vocals and the orchestra are doing that for you. So why should you just focus on the obvious bits? If you can pull out something, if the dance can add something even more on top of that and add an extra level, then that's what I want to be doing. I don't want to just do the same as everyone else is doing in the creative team already, because they're doing their job and they're doing it brilliantly. I'll do mine. So the music really helps. The imagery that a director sends over to me, or that a set designer sends, or costume, or even the lighting, like it comes down from the lighting. If they turn around and say, oh, we've got a really nice light that we can use at this point to help highlight something, then I'll definitely work to that, because I know that sometimes that will go, that would look really good in silhouette, or actually that would look awful in silhouette, so let me change my idea to help them. So yeah, so the inspiration can come from anything, anywhere on that realm, if that makes sense. But thank you very much for the question, Shardy. Choreography for me is just a mass collaboration. Like, I know there's a lot of direct choreographers and I've done it myself, but even more when I'm direct choreographing than when I'm just choreographing, I'll do it in the room, because I think if I just do it on my own, there's no one to tell me if it's rubbish, which is my biggest fear in a room, is that I create something that someone could have told me that isn't very good. And I don't mean that in a negative way, I mean it in a, it's very hard to self-police, because if you think you're onto something really good and actually you get 2 weeks down the line and you finally realise it's not, if someone could have told me a week ago that it wasn't, I've saved a week of rehearsals. So the more collaboration I can have and the more input I can have from an actor and a performer or a fellow creative, the better it's going to be, because we can all build on that from there. So that's what I feel makes the choreography better and what really drives it forward. Anyone, any other questions before we all head back into our lockdown states? I hope everyone's all right and enjoying it, and I hope everyone's been able to do some dancing. I've been really lucky in that I've got a local studio that I can get down to and use, so I've been trying to keep a little bit creative and created some work for Theatre Together. We managed to create a new piece for that, so if anyone wants to head over to Theatre Together and see that, it'd be really appreciated. If anyone does any questions and you kind of haven't asked them on here and you didn't want to ask them on here, hit me up on Instagram or Twitter and I'll always happily answer. Christian, when working with the dancer actors of low or lower level of ability than expected, do you adapt movement to lean into character more, or would you prefer to simply choreograph? So it all depends on the show. If I'm doing a big dance musical and realise that actually there's some people in the number that can't necessarily do it, then I'll find ways of reworking that number, because there's no point. I don't want to make someone look as if they can't do it on stage, and I don't want to make anyone look uncomfortable. If it's a piece, so when I did the Wild Party at Royal Academy of Music last year, kind of I went into it not knowing their dance ability, because we didn't do a dance audition, we just went in, and I was able to kind of go, okay, I'm not going to look at this as a dance show, I'm going to look at it as a movement-led show, and the stuff that we were able to create out of character work and out of just finding something that felt comfortable on their bodies at that time was incredible. What we managed to get out of that experience from people who had very little dance experience before compared to a bigger dance musical, I was so happy with and so proud of them. And that was through pushing the character and pushing to find out what the character can bring to that movement and how then that character would do that move. So you give them a very simple move, or you give them a very intricate move, and it still looks the same because it's how the character does it. So it's finding that. Does that make sense, Christian? So it's about, for me, working with the character to find a way to get them to do that move that still gets the move done how I want it, but makes them feel comfortable on stage at the same time. I think that's my answer. I think that's how I work. That's how I like to think I work. So that's that. Just checking across all media platforms. But yeah, so I'm at Whittaker Choreography on Instagram and Twitter. So if anyone's got any questions or you just want to chat about anything, please feel free to reach out. I'll happily talk to anyone about anything to do with dance and choreography. Or if you just kind of want to know any more bits in specific, then just send me over a question. It's been great to talk to everyone. Thank you so much. I hope you managed to find something out that you weren't kind of sure of, or something that you didn't even know about. But yeah, also I've got a website, Whittaker Choreography. Feel free to jump over and check out anything there. There's loads of examples of stuff. Oh, Shardy, hello, sorry. Have there been moments where something's worked more in your head in theory than in practice? Yeah, so Seussical's a massive example of that. I did an entire number that was going to have skateboards, and there was going to be fish on skateboards, these little miniature skateboard things, and in my head it was amazing, and it was going to really work, and the more we did it, the more we realised that space was not our friend. And we also had people waving big fish around and a bathtub that had to move around. And so in my head I was thinking, no, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this. And the director kept telling me it's not going to work. And then, and not in a negative way, he wasn't being negative about it. He was just saying, like, look, realistically, this isn't going to happen. So I ended up tweaking it and changing it and became really happy with the end result. But that was through waiting until it was on stage and going, I can't see a way out yet, but I know that when I'm on set and I can see the whole number from a different point of view, I'll be able to get that answer. Does that make sense? So I look at the whole picture and go, does it need to be added there? For me, that felt like it did, but then when I saw it on stage, I realised that it didn't, and I could tell the same part of that journey with a different way. So that was kind of my experience of finding something where in my head it was amazing, but in reality it just didn't particularly work out. And a lot of times I find that with, oh, hello, Arthur Pitter, thank you very much for joining. Huge honour to have you listening. I find that lifts in my head, as in lifting people up, work a lot better in my head than they do in reality, because I look at it and go, oh yeah, that should be able to work. And then you get there and you go, it doesn't. But out of trying it, you find something much better and much more exciting. So I find that even if something doesn't work in reality how you hoped it would, you find something even better by going through that process and just ploughing through that wall to get to what the end result will be. So I hope that makes sense, Charlie. Thank you very much. Yes, if anyone's got any final questions, feel free to throw them at me. It's been amazing to talk to you. Thank you so much for listening to me rabbit on for half an hour about my processes and how I work. I love creating theatre and I can't wait to get back to doing it. I know that kind of it's been a weird time for everyone recently, but there is still some beautiful work out there being created, and we're so lucky that everyone's streaming kind of all their work online, like the National and Hamilton's coming out soon, and A Monster Calls has just been announced that it's coming out from the Old Vic, and that is possibly one of the best pieces of devised movement I think anyone will ever see. So whoever it was beginning, Monty, if you watch anything, watch A Monster Calls that's coming out streaming at the moment, and that is just an incredible movement language that's created by a team that just 100% commit. So thank you very much indeed, everyone. It's been an honour to talk to you all. Thank you. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And if that's it, take care. Keep checking out King's Head online. They've got so many more amazing people coming to talk. But yeah, thank you very much indeed. I'll see you all again very soon. Bye.